welcome members and officers to the hybrid meeting of the Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Just to remind members, this meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the public and press today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely, and a recording of this meeting will be available on the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting has concluded, should anyone else wish to view it. Just to confirm, as a council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notifications or requests to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. As a reminder, may I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when they want to speak. Please, could you also keep your microphone muted when not talking, so there aren't any interruptions encountered. Thank you. Before I start the meeting at the agenda proper, can I just thank everybody for all their contributions during the last year, as this will probably be our last meeting of the Education Overview and Scrutiny before the next term of council starts. So moving on to the agenda, could Geraint, our Democratic Services Officer, confirm if we've received any apologies, please?
No problem, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillor Glyn-Caron and from Michelle Jones.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add, Chair, I've had apologies from Councillor Overton yesterday.
Sorry, Leanne, you're echoing.
Councillor Overton sent his apologies yesterday.
Did you catch that, Geraint?
Yeah, Councillor Overton.
Oh,
yes.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Okay, declarations of interest. Could I ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any declarations of interest to declare? Councillor Evans.
None that I'm aware of, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
None that I'm aware of.
Councillor Killick.
There may be a reference to the Community Council, Pontypool Community Council, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Overton's absent. Councillor Powell, I can't see Councillor Powell on. Councillor Thomas.
Aware of, Chair, thank you.
Vicky Hawler.
None that I'm aware of, Chair.
Thanks. And I'm not aware of any either, but we will declare if we start discussing something that we should be made aware. Agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of February 2022. Just to remind members, these minutes relate to the report we received on the EAS business plan. Please could I ask members to confirm that the minutes are accurate account of the meeting, and if anyone is in favour or wishes to abstain, please can you confirm now? No, I'll take those as approved. Thank you very much. That takes us to agenda item 4, the action sheet. Please could members confirm if they have any questions or whether they are happy with the action sheet. Similarly, if anyone is against or wishes to abstain, please can you confirm now? Any comments or questions on the action sheet? No, I'll take that as
Sorry, Chair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still not happy with the answer to 4.1. I think there is a difference in opinion as to what open access means. My understanding, as a former professional in the area, I'm still a professional within the area, is that open access means that it's open to any young person within the age range, which is 11 to 25, focusing on those aged 13 to 19. And that isn't specific to a particular characteristic, as in the Equality Act, or a particular age. And I would say that nearly all of these examples are actually referencing they are referencing either characteristics from the Equality 2010 Act, or they are relevant to a particular age. So for me, that was not the question I was asking. I realise, perhaps I should have asked the question more clearly and prefaced it with what I've just said, but there is one there, for instance, if you just bear with me a moment, that refers to Pontypool Community Council work on a Wednesday at Crane Street, where the group ended up having too many people, so it actually got broken down into two age groups, 13 to 15 and 15 to 19, where the 15-year-olds could choose which one they attend. But across those two sessions, all young people, even whether they lived in Pontypool or not, were welcome to attend. That's my understanding of open access. And I just, in the next term, this committee might be able to follow that up. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry for being so laboured in that.
No problem. I agree with you. And when we have an open access play, it means anybody can come and go as they please. Kathy, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, if I could, Chair. I read the breakdown and I was a little bit concerned by some of them that said they run on a Thursday, when I know for a fact that they only run monthly. So yes, they do run on a Thursday, but they only run every month. So I'd like a more detailed breakdown of how often these provisions run, how many of them are weekly, how many of them are monthly, bi-monthly, so we can actually see what is on offer from the youth service for our young people on a weekly basis.
I'd like to add to
Thank
that,
you.
and I mentioned it to Leanne via email. This doesn't tell me where, apart from some of the headings which says Coal Farm or Pontypool. I'd like to know what provision is down the south of the borough for a start, and I'm sure Councillor Thomas would. I'd like to know who the partners are as well. So, Leanne, can you please, we'd like to know where these provisions are, how often they are run, and what partners are in partnership, whether they are a lead partner or whether the council leads on them, the youth service. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Can we follow that up, Leanne? Thank you for that.
Is it? I'm sorry. Is it in this where? Is this? I'm a bit confused. I think there were two sets of responses. This isn't the one, is it, where we asked what they meant by capacity and a couple of other questions. Leanne, which was that in? Sorry.
The capacity related to the AAS business plan, didn't it? I think you asked them for clarification.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this initial question was raised at that meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
On youth provision, or was it the meeting before?
Well, you asked the question, John, and you didn't get the response that you wanted, so we asked again in the next
That's
meeting.
right.
That's right.
Oh, and this is the response, yeah.
I asked with regards to what they meant by capacity. I mean, so what the response that we had was that it had been taken out of the document. That really wasn't what I was asking for at all. The reason I was asking what capacity meant was because I was trying to understand what their problem was. Just excuse me. Insufficient capacity may mean they haven't got enough time. It may mean they haven't got sufficient staff, or it may mean they haven't got the ability. Now, if it's that they haven't got sufficient staff or they haven't got sufficient time, that may be something that scrutiny can help with.
Yeah.
If it's that they're suggesting that there isn't the ability, and that is what capacity means, then I think we have a serious problem with regards to how we address that, both in scrutiny and with governing bodies. So I wasn't wanting capacity to be eradicated from the document. I actually wanted it to be helpful in terms of let's look at what this scrutiny committee needs to do to help to address it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been a bit laboured again there, but
no, it's not. I mean, and actually, your question was picked up by Estin when they interviewed me, John. So they seem to understand what you meant. So It would be useful if we have that information. Thanks, Leanne. Okay. Are we happy then with those additions that we're okay with the action sheet? Yeah. That's approved with the additions that Leanne has picked up. Agenda item 5, which is the update on recommendations report. Can I invite Leanne to go through the report? Leanne?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. Sorry, I got a cough and fits.
You have got an echo there.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard report, as members are aware, that I present to committee members each year. It consists of the progress and impact made on the committee's recommendations throughout this year. The committee has specifically been asked to look at whether appropriate progress has been made as provided within the implementation of recommendation sections within your report pack. If members are satisfied that the recommendations have been fully implemented and progress is deemed appropriate, then this item can be removed from further annual monitoring. If, however, the committee isn't satisfied with progress, then the recommendations will continue to be monitored throughout the next municipal year. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. We did have a couple of questions on that update progress report, but I'll. Do you want me to take those now? Yeah. Okay. The officers are in the chamber, Geraint. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep, Chair.
All right. So our first question, we had 3 questions on the progress impact report recommendations. And my first question is on page 23 of the report pack, in recommendation 1, the first bullet point, trainees and newly qualified teaching staff. Members felt these school staff have particularly had a distorted period during the pandemic due to the inability to teach in a classroom setting, and therefore may require further support. Can you confirm what's happening with this and whether additional support is being provided for these staff?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, absolutely.
Thank you, Dermot.
Thanks, Chair. So obviously all NQTs have an induction programme and have additional supervision. So all schools, and there is an induction programme that's supported through the region, and some of our lead head teachers support with that too. So there's a good process wrapped around all NQTs already that looks at their individual needs. So there's a generic offer, but then there's a tailored offer for each of those individuals too. That work's continued throughout the pandemic, and we've been really keen, for the very reason that committee has highlighted here, to make sure that support is in place. In terms of trainees or trainee teachers coming in on placement, we're now back into a more typical space, I think, because during different phases of the pandemic, we've had a number of discussions with schools about the appropriateness of trainees coming in. That is back in place now, and in effect, there's a very similar process around trainee teachers coming in on their placement. That ensures, again, on a bespoke basis, those colleagues have got the right support tailored to their individual needs. That's organised through the school individually, as you'd imagine, together with a training provider, but is also supported by ourselves where it is needed. That's a very rare occurrence. We obviously offer support to schools. We've got no feedback at the moment that there are any particular issues arising from any concerns around trainees or NQTs. And just to reassure committee, we have been obviously meeting with the trade unions throughout this period too. So neither head teachers nor the trade unions have been feeding back specific concerns, and we continue to meet with heads on a regular basis. So our next, in fact it's this afternoon, I think our next meeting with heads coming up. So really happy to take that back to heads and just raise it again, just by way of reassurance if there are any issues. And I'll certainly happy to do that and feedback before the next committee through you, Chair, if there is anything there. But I'm quite confident we've got the systems in place to pick that up already, but happy to check again.
Thank you, Dermot, and that will be useful. I've got the next question as well. So referring to page 27, your response to recommendation 1, you state that when children return to school, teachers assess their level of ability to determine their learning in terms of catch-up. What is the situation within our schools now, and are pupils catching up on progress appropriately?
So, Chair, I suppose it's fair to say that we continue to work to make sure that all children are in schools. We have obviously an extensive piece of work going on between schools and the Education and Welfare Service and other supports through inclusion to make sure that we're getting all of our children back. So just to offer reassurance, we know attendance rates are not as good as we'd like them to be and have been significantly impacted, obviously, by the pandemic. So first things first, we want to get every learner in, and we're reaching out to those families and those learners whose attendance remains troublesome, if I can put it like that. Every individual school is now looking at its own school development plan, and within each of those development plans, schools are creating their own objectives and priorities based on their assessment of their individual circumstances. So as part of our discussions, we're working our way through every single school, and we'll have completed that by the end of, certainly by the end of the summer, and the bulk of them, I think, are already done. We're picking up that discussion with schools about what their individual needs are based on those individual assessments. What I can't give you is an overview of, at this point, what individual schools are saying around the level of additional support that they require, or what individual programs that they've put in place, because we're still working our way through that process. I think we will be able to put that in front of you in the summer term, because that's something we're really keen to look at as well. But we need to work through that with schools at the moment. The reassurance, again, I would give is that that's a very detailed piece of work that we're doing with schools as part of our priorities that we've agreed with the EAS and committees looked at previously. In terms of the next iteration of the EAS business plan, we're obviously looking at ensuring progress of all vulnerable learners, not just free school meals or LAC, but across the piece, and clearly this fits into that arena. So I'd be wanting to bring back to committee, whether we do it in a formal committee or give you a written update, an overview of where we think we are with schools in terms of that in the summer term, but we need to work through that. Last reassurance from me, obviously we're talking to schools about the what technically is the surplus budget position, but obviously schools have been getting lots of resource through over the COVID period, and we've seen a significant increase in surplus budget positions in schools. So we're also talking to schools how they can make best use of the additional funding that they've had. I think that surplus currently is running at 8 million. We anticipate that will go up even further. That's an extraordinary amount of money, and it's not something that we've seen, certainly in the time I've been in this role, and that is a function of where we've been with funding available over the pandemic period. So we're also talking to schools about how they get the best use of that resource, and clearly ensuring that all children and young people in the here and now are getting the support they need is really important. So we're keen to make sure that schools use that funding now to support those learners. And again, we'll come back to you maybe with an overview of where we are with that work once that work's worked its way through the system over the next 8 or 9 weeks or so.
Thank you, Dermot. I think members were concerned about the pace of catch-up as well, so that it gets done sooner rather than later. So we look forward to that feedback. Question 3 is Councillor Cathy Evans.
Morning, Dermot. With regards to the WESP and the committee's concerns around the difficulties in attracting and increasing the number of Welsh, particular ALN Welsh teaching staff within our schools, I've been aware that we are currently employing a teaching agency that are based in Kent. Can you tell me why that is, please?
You're better informed than me if that's the case, because I'm not aware of that. That's when you say we, do you mean we as individual schools or as council? Because council, we're not typically reaching out to agencies for our staff. Sorry, Councillor, I'm not sure where that comes from.
I think there was, we were told recently in a meeting, I don't know whether other committee members remember, that Welsh Government had approved extra funding for us to approach an agency to try and help to attract in Welsh language staff. which we were excited about because obviously that's what we want. And I've since found out that that agency is based in Kent, which obviously, I wouldn't imagine has a great deal of Welsh speakers. And it concerns me that, posts from an agency in Kent will go into the Western Mail and the South Wales Argus when Welsh speakers are reading Golwg and other Welsh medium newspapers and magazines and not reading those English language ones.
I take your concern, and I have to say that's a bit of news to me. So look, in terms of the local authority, we, to my knowledge, haven't used an agency to procure teaching staff directly. The only example I can think of, which may cross over, but let me go away and double check on this, is during the Gwyn Clw recruitment process recently, so a school-based recruitment process, they did reach out to recruitment agency, and I wonder if, so that's where this has come from. Let me take that away. Let me have a look at that and see if that's the source. But to my knowledge, we as a local authority we don't recruit teachers, so I'm struggling to see how we would be actually using that agency. My suspicion is it might be an issue with Gwyn Clw, but I'll take that away and look at it. But if we could have a discussion separately about just any information you can give me, I promise I'll look into that and come back to you quickly.
Of course, Dermot. Just send me an email and we'll arrange a time to have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's our 3 questions on the progress and impact of our accepted recommendations. Members happy with the responses you've had this morning, and members happy to retain those items that Leanne has put on the document for us. Yeah, I just realised they were colour-coded, Leanne, so thank you very much for that. Quite useful.
Retain or remove the? Are you happy with progress?
Are you all happy with progress? There are some items, obviously, with the questions that we've said today. I think we'll leave them on until the new committee, and then they can make the decision. Then, Leanne. So, if they come back, that'll be fine. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 6, which is the report on the development of the wellbeing offer for children and young people. Dermot, can I just ask a question? I've received a draft copy of this report, the Children and Young People's report. Is it due to go out to members?
Dermot? Yeah, sorry, Chair. That is so the Children's Services Development Plan. Chair, is that the?
Yes, because it actually in the wellbeing document it refers to it. So I was just wondering whether or not members could have sight of that document as well. So.
Yeah, I'd asked that question previously because we had originally attached that as an appendix to this report, because I realised, members, that I'm referring to a document that hasn't been shared yet. The sharing of that, I believe, is scheduled for the next week or so, the next couple of weeks, when it will come out to Cabinet in the first instance, and then come out for widespread consultation. So, Chair, apologies. I think the timing of just how that's being launched has defeated us in terms of not being able to share that with you, and I was advised we couldn't. So as soon as that's available, I'll check in with the Chief Exec and colleagues in Democratic Services. I'll ensure that the committee will have a copy of that email to you. Can I say, Chair, that it's an obvious item, just as a plug. It's an obvious item. I'm sure you'll want to look at in your basket of items going forward, of course.
Yes, it's just that you mentioned last week, I think, that it was going to go out to members that day, and then when we hadn't had a copy, so I'd had the draft copy. Okay, so the purpose of this report is to update members on the progress of developing a wellbeing offer for the children and young people. And may I welcome Jess Gabriel, Systems Development Officer, and Dermot, I've already mentioned and welcomed, the Chief Officer Education, to the meeting. And can I ask officers if they could provide members with a brief overview of the main points within the report? Who's speaking first?
Yeah, Chair, if I lead off, and Jess has been involved in developing some of the work underneath this, and has played a really important role. But if I give an overview, Chair, and then perhaps open it up for questions, we'll try and make this as non-technical in parts, because I know some of it is. So we'll try and make it really simple. So key message number one is that we know we've made limited progress against this area of work. So to be clear, what's the work, what are we trying to achieve in the wellbeing offer? So this is not about suggesting that we haven't been very busy, particularly with the last 2 years in light of COVID, in ensuring a wide range of effective services are in place to support wellbeing for children. Okay, so we're not talking about activity here in terms of what we're doing in support of children's mental health and physical health as well. This is about a piece of work looking at bringing a system together that would provide a tool for parents, for children themselves, and for professionals to be able to more readily access what's on offer. So I hope that distinction is clear. This isn't about the activity in delivering those services. It's about how do we more efficiently look at ensuring we've got oversight of what's available, not just from council services, but from health services and third sector, our partners in the voluntary sector, to ensure that there's a good oversight of what's available and make sure that people can access that information in a succinct and easy way. So we've completed some of the work around that development of that tool, and we've tried to outline that in the report that you've got available. This was part originally of T22 of that particular scheme, and as the Chair's already mentioned, it will now go forward and become part of the plan around the Children's Services Development Plan going forward. So what we've tried to outline in the report is the stages that we've gone through. We have made some progress, and of course you'll see in the report from Project Panda that we've actually created the concept now that we've shared, not because this isn't just a tool for Torvine, this was shared through the Public Services Board as well, and was something that all partners were keen to engage in. I think where we are currently is that tool is being considered by the Public Services Board, and some of the feedback that we've had is that the tool's based on a system called DAWIS, and that's an all-Wales system which provides information, again, very similarly on a wide range of services, and this is available to professionals. The concerns that have been raised, I think, are around the usability of that system, and actually will it give us what we really want, which is a comprehensive, rich picture of wellbeing services in Torvine. So we need to go back to our colleagues, particularly in public health, because they've been having an internal discussion around what might be the way to take this work forward, or if we use DAWIS. And we're also now going to have to look again at are there alternatives available if that product, which is a national product, as I say, doesn't give us the infrastructure we need to pull that together. We can give you a bit of an update, and Jess can come in, and this may be on questions, about the discussions we're having with TVA and some of the work we're doing with health about alternative products that are in development in parallel, and some of that work is continuing. So, Chair, in a nutshell, have we made enough progress? No, we haven't got the product complete. Have we done all the things that we said we would do in the plan around developing the Project Panda tool to the point that we agreed we would? Yes. We haven't seen the traction we would like to see in terms of moving this forward. We can't do this by ourselves. This is a critical partnership piece of work, because we can easily print off all the stuff that we do in council in terms of supporting wellbeing, but actually what we're after is trying to agree on a partnership basis a wider a tool to help us understand what that wider provision map looks like, and there's more work to do there. We know what we need to do. We have another model in place to take this work forward if we need to, if we can't make more progress with DAWIS. And I think, Jess, unless there's anything else to add there, that's an overview of where we are at the moment. There's clearly more detail in the report and in the attached appendices. And Chair, if I pause there, I'll suggest we open up for questions.
Thank you. Can I just clarify, because there was a bit of confusion of whether it was a product Panda, but it looks like Project Panda and the product is DAWIS. Is that confirmed?
Yeah,
It refers in the report to Product Panda, but it is supposed to be Project Panda. Is that correct?
They were Project Panda when we started the report, and they've had a rebranding of the company. So by the time they produce the report, I think.
It's product now. Right, okay. There was a bit of confusion there.
Sorry, my fault if I've done that. Apologies.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, we'll go straight on to questions then. John Killick, you've got the first question. Would you ask the first question, please?
Yeah, I think the first question, I just asked more detail on what you've just been talking about, Dermot. In paragraph 3.5, you state that arising from Project Panda's review, they concluded that all Dawes.Cymru held some of the information that professionals and users may wish to access. The tool was not a complete tool, and that professionals and users needed, nor were they confident in using the tool. You go on to say within the next paragraph that partners from Public Health Wales have taken a paper to the National Leads Group to discuss possible solutions to develop Dawes to fit professionals' needs for information on wellbeing services. Do we know what the outcome of this is and what the solution is being proposed?
So I'll bring Jess in this because I think this is where we've been talking to Public Health in terms of that piece of work. So I'm not entirely sure we do know what the outcome of it is. The key point here is that, before I ask Jess just to come in and comment on that point about timescale, is what we realised early in this project is trying to create a tool of the magnitude that we want to and harvest that information from across all partners would involve a very significant investment and probably is beyond the means of an individual council. So the cost associated with this piece of work is quite modest. I think it was around 20,000 or so to get to this point. This was not a major area of investment as part of T22. So it would be inefficient for us and I think too difficult, given the scale of our organisation, to try and achieve this together. Hence why we have to go through that partnership piece of work and really look at maximising the benefit we can get from what is already a national tool. But in terms of taking the work forward, Jess, can you just describe where we are in terms of that process?
Yeah, I've got a meeting with health colleagues later on this month to discuss where we go next with it, because really the crux of the report that they've taken to the social care, the directors for public health, is looking at, is Dawes the way forward, or do we need to consider an alternative tool? So I think we'll have a progress update on that, and then that will either lead to more work being done by that lead officer group for public health leads across Wales, or it will come back to us then to do a further piece of work as PSB partnership on it. It really does depend on what their conclusion is for that report, which avenue we go down next.
Thank you, Jess.
Can I just ask just a very, very specific question? Jess, I'm sure it may well say this somewhere in the report, I just haven't seen it. But does Dawes have information sharing protocols built into it?
Yes, there are some built into it, but as you're probably aware, that Dawes was designed as a public platform to share information about services that were available when the Social Care Act was introduced. So that's really what the product's been designed for. So the parts of it we're testing now are, can it interface in the way that professionals need it to interact with it, which it makes it a slightly different tool to what it was originally designed for. So the sharing protocols are there in place of, for instance, Family Information Service and Dawes exchange information. I think that's on a nightly basis. So there is exchange of information. The question over it really is it everything that professionals need?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Chair, just to add to that, clearly as other users would come online, you're absolutely right to ask the question, because we'd have to extend the ISP to include those, but the facility is there. But Jess's point, I think, is about the usability at the moment and the extraction of that information.
Thank you both. Okay, our next question, question 2, is Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies to me, I had to leave the meeting briefly. Thank you, Dermot. My question is relating to paragraph 4.3, in which you state that you have made good progress on developing more detailed information on service offers such as early years, ALN, the youth service, sports development and play, and that you have already shared this with schools. Excuse me a minute. Relevant users and also partners. Have all schools, relevant users and partners, had an opportunity to contribute to the development of the information on service offers appropriately?
So that refers to a piece of work, an ongoing piece of work that we've been doing with schools over the pandemic. So I think, again, we may have shared this already with committee around the wellbeing offer that we piece of work we did jointly actually with the EAS and with other partners during the pandemic to give schools an overview of the availability of services, something that schools have come back and rated highly since. Now, that was important at that point simply because I think there was a lot of people trying to do lots of things during initial phases of the pandemic, and schools were being bombarded with different information. So we were trying to align that. If we had this tool up and running, of course, we might have that might have been more simple. So that was a paper-based exercise. So in terms of asking schools about shaping that offer, what schools are involved in looking at and are regularly asked about how they think our services as council are delivered. So youth and play do lots of that routinely as part of their work. I think there's some really good practice there. We do an annual survey, which again I think we shared with committee before, about asking schools post hoc what they've thought of services, and we also have got specific work streams looking at, particularly around ALN, of course, around the implementation of some of that work and shaping how we go around delivering those services. Could we do more in terms of asking schools about services that they would like to see, and particularly children and young people too? I think there's more work we can do there, and that's certainly what we're anticipating doing going forward. We do hope schools have agreed actually that we can have an in-person conference in the summer term. So part of the work we're doing over the next few weeks is shaping up what that would look like. That'll pick up on some of the questions asked already, I think, around recovery, around what we need to do in terms of supporting wellbeing going forward. How do we reshape some of our services? Because we recognised what we were doing 2 years ago before all of this stuff kicked off. We're actually going to have to change the way we do things. So maybe in terms of attendance support, in terms of psychology, in terms of other supports. So more to do there is what I would say in response to where we've been, and that work is being planned now.
Thank you, Chair. As I said, we move in progress, but there's always more that we can do.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Referring to this similar question, you've listed early years ALN and what have you, and you've said the relevant users and partners have had an opportunity to contribute. I'd just like to know where parents fit into this. Obviously, early years and ALN would want a parent voice rather than a child and young person's voice. Very often. Thanks.
Yeah. So obviously within the Act and within the previous legislation, reaching out to children and young people is their right as well. So as part of our work around participation, we're really keen to make sure we do that. But you're right, adults do need to be consulted. So over the period, I think you raised about ALN in particular. So we do have a contract with SNAP, which is the Parents Advocacy Group. There has been a regional working group working with parents that we're part of. Not forgetting that we've had the transformation lead post based with us as part of the regional work. And one of the things that we've done within that overall piece of work around ALN is devise a regional reference group for parents and for adults around ALN. So that work has been there. Have we done specific consultation with the community in general around the design of all services? I think the answer is no. I'm not sure we would necessarily in all services. Again, committee will remember that we did just before the initial lockdown, we've been in consultation around youth play and sports development, and and that had been a community-based consultation, something we know that we need to return to. So really happy to look at that in terms of any recommendations from committee about any further participation work or consultation work. I think we're in a period now as we come through, hopefully the end of where we've been, in a period of reflection, which we need to engage with the community on in terms of how we reshape services. Because where we were before is we're not there now, and we need to think again. So definitely something that we're thinking about as a service area, and I think as a council. And the Children's Services Development Plan, Chair, again, I know you've seen it, but others haven't, will go out to consultation, and that will be a focal point, I think, for some of those discussions, because the consultation process around that will be with the whole community. And again, we anticipate that will be happening over the summer term.
Yeah, I think our concerns were about the parents of early years. My 2-year-old grandson wouldn't contribute, and obviously we have some serious ALN children that probably wouldn't have vocal responses or anything. So we'll pick that up. So thank you very much. John Killick, you've got your hand up.
I apologise I wasn't able to help with the meeting yesterday. But, I was on a different meeting. Would you mind if I took that from parents into the engagement with young people?
Absolutely, yes, no problem at all.
Thank you. I'm interested in what the report says about a youth parliament, particularly interested in the process that will take. I mean, it is something that's very, very dear to my heart. And I often have concerns. In fact, I wrote a paper on it once that it isn't used to sort of just say, well, look, we've done this now. So I'm interested in how that youth parliament will take its shape. I'm very hopeful that it's not one group of people that talks for all young people from the age of 11 to 25 in one place, and that it isn't actually like Parliament at all. Could you just tell me what shape that will take, please?
Can I start? Because Jess has done lots of the work around this and has been heavily involved in the design. The initial discussion, John, I think started with a concern that we've got lots of different representative groups for children and young people. They're quite disparate. We've got the youth forum, we've got a number of youth forums, we've got the school councils and so on. So one of the things we were keen to do was to make sure that everyone had the ability to have their voice heard, because some young people will be perhaps attracted to more groups at particular times and maybe not at others. So the intention here was to try and get a meaningful representative voice from across children and young people. So that was, I think, one of our aims in working to this model. Obviously, we've worked very closely with children and young people in trying to design this too, and I've taken, obviously our lead from them. And it's based on, the work we've done is based on the participation principles for children and young people. So this isn't the aim here, and one of our success criteria is that this isn't just a place we go once the adults have decided what we want to do and then say to young people, what do you think of that? The aim here is absolutely about how do children and young people have a representative voice in shaping what our thinking is, and then how we deliver the outcomes against that thinking. So just the reassurance is that's the intention. It's just about to go live as well, but perhaps if I bring Jess in here and she can give you a fuller picture of some of the mechanics and how that's going to be delivered. Jess?
Yeah, and I think we should say as well that I've taken this to the Public Service Board, and they're going to recognise the Torvine Youth Alliance, as they've now decided their name will be. They're going to recognise that as the body of which they'll take their participation and questions to as a larger audience. There is a full framework document that I can share with scrutiny members that sets out the tiers that we're going to, because obviously it's quite a large piece of work to roll it out all in one piece of work. So the initial stage now that will start later on in the month will be to network and join together all of the youth forums that exist in Torvine, and that will include, things like Pontypool Community Councils, Housing Association, youth groups, young carers, the Gypsy Travellers, forums, they'll all be invited in to take part in that top tier of the model. Then the second stage of that is to open that out to secondary schools, so all schools councils will be engaged in it. Primary schools at a later date, and then the last and possibly the more difficult part of it to do is around how do we offer an opportunity to young people that aren't members of forums. How do we offer them an opportunity to get involved in the particular topics that they might have an interest in, but they don't necessarily want to join a forum and be part of it all year round. So we're very conscious of that. That's probably going to need some technical tools around that to make sure that they can engage safely, and probably some of that will need to be a sort of hybrid meeting. Also then we've got plans then, so 2 of the meetings per year will be probably be online, and then one of them is going to be in person in a question time style format. So that will mean that the young people will be invited. We'll have a panel. It could be scrutiny members. It could be the chief exec, roles like Dermot, and other public service leads to be on a panel. So there will be an option then for the young people to attend that session and ask the questions directly of the leaders and the decision makers. Also interweaved into this as well is that we've looked at the British Youth Council. So for Torfaen we have a British Youth Council member and we have a Wales Youth Parliament members. How do we get that information to the young people and to elected members about what they're discussing at those in the same way as we would really for if you take it in the adult, the professional world, you'll know what's being discussed at Welsh Government, it'll come into council or cabinet. How do we create the same sort of structure around that, around the Torfaen Youth Alliance? So work through the model then is sort of regular meetings, the Youth Parliament member and the British Youth Council member are part of that alliance. They do happen to sit on the Youth Forum at the moment, but those models will make sure then that we've got information exchanges for what they're being discussed on a local level. How does that hit decision makers and chief officers? And then how does that information get to all of the young people so they have an option then of what they want to debate and how do they engage with it. Also underpinning all of this then is the number of surveys, deciding which surveys are the most important and tell us what young people in Torfaen are thinking about and what's important to them at those periods in time. So we'll use surveys like Make Your Mark to make sure then we're putting structure around the topics that young people want to discuss and how they want to take it forward. This project is very much co-designed, and I think Councillor Seaborn and Councillor Kinnock were on one of the Youth Forum members' evenings where I took it to the Youth Forum so that we could co-design it and finalise the final model, which I'll share in the framework with you.
Can I ask one very, very specific question? I mean, I appreciate that we've gone through strange times, but we're coming out of that now to the extent that young people can meet. I'm wondering, I'm concerned about the youth, the question and answer thing. I know the Police and Crime Commissioner does that, and it concerns me that young people aged 11 to 25 are all engaged in the same. In fact, they're even their workers are there as well. Within what you're suggesting, Jess, might you have room for residential experiences where young people can be engaged in formulating policy rather than responding to it?
We did that once, didn't we, John?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the short answer, I think, to that is that will be a decision for the Youth Alliance. And so if there are requests to look at more in detail, time-consuming pieces of work, then there are regular, or there have been in the past, and you'll know this yourself, We have the residential pieces of work within the youth service. Clearly that highlights, for the reasons you've outlined, given the age range, just some careful planning around the safeguarding arrangements and so on. But again, committee, I'd reassure you, although we haven't been given a budget for this, we've created a budget for the young people to facilitate that sort of work happening. So over this first year, we put aside £10,000 to enable some of that work to remove any barriers to that work should it be needed. So I think that's very much within the gift of the children and young people themselves who take part in this work. Obviously, we'll be supporting and ensuring all the safeguarding arrangements and facilitation is there. And we've also tried to put a nominal budget in initially, and clearly as this work develops, we'll review that. And if we require more, then we'll make the suitable request where we need to try and identify that budget. So short answer is yes, it can do, and it'll be determined by the young people themselves.
Thanks for your forbearance, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, just one point on that. I've been, and John as well, has participated in a lot of information sharing with young people. Have we built in an exercise to feed back what happens after they've done their questionnaires and their because very often they're left in the air having answered a questionnaire and then not knowing where it's gone or what it's produced? So is there a facility there to feed back to these young people after they've been consulted?
Yes, in the framework document, we've set in a sort of a self-assessment part, a self-evaluation part of it, and the ability to feed back. Then I'm regularly invited back to the youth forum currently, but I'm hoping that model will continue. Then that they'll regularly invite me back, and I'll update them along then with some written reports and. I envisage that we'll share the same report with the officers as we'll share with the young people, and everybody will have access to the same information.
Thank you, Jess. I think members were concerned that it was just a desktop exercise with specific people, young people, or not encompassing all that may well contribute to the consultation. So thanks for that. And I'm sure we'll pick that up in recommendations. So question 4 is for Councillor Cathy Evans.
So, within the action plan, you state against the first recommendation that development of the wellbeing offer product to demonstrate tangible outcomes has been delayed due to the pandemic, and that an options appraisal is now being carried out with Product Panda on how a wellbeing offer can be delivered via an online tool. How will you pick up the pace of progress against this recommendation now that we are basically, we're coming out of the restrictions and things, and we can't keep falling back on the pandemic as an excuse all the time? So how are you planning on picking up the pace and getting to where we should be, hopefully?
Yeah, I don't think it's an excuse, Councillor Evans. I think what we were saying was there were delays because of all the reasons we're familiar with. And we were absolutely accepting the pace of progress hasn't been what we wanted to be. What we've explained earlier is that the product is complete and that piece of work is there and it's ready. Where we now are in the process takes us back to the earlier answer around working with partners, evaluating with public health colleagues in particular how they feel about DAWIS and is that the suitable tool that we need to look at. As we've explained, there's a further meeting later this month. We'll get feedback at that point. And I think that's a critical decision point for the partnership and for us as council about do we continue to try to make DAWIS work for us in the way we think it could be made to work, or do we look at a different source tool to actually gather that information? So in the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks, we'll know where that is. I think you're quite right, though, to ask the question about how do we keep pace moving on this one. And I think what we'll do as soon as we have that answer is review where the project plan is for this piece of work. So I think we've got a big decision to make there about do we take that forward or do we look at something more specific just for us in Torvine, and in Torvine services. I really hope we don't get to that point, because that was the whole intention originally, was to try and have something which was more pervasive. But I think we're coming to a crunch point in that decision making. And again, when we get that update, we'll keep this committee informed of that decision and where we go next. But yeah, please be assured, we want to move forward with this as quickly as we can. That piece of review work will really determine where we go next. But we will produce an updated project plan at that point.
Thank you. I think we were concerned that progress may have stalled slightly, and that, you know, how you were going to get that going. So that's answered that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I've got question 5, and I think you probably answered this, but I'll ask it anyway. Against recommendation 2, you state that the survey will be undertaken of children and young people to gauge their perceptions of need, the services they want to have access to, and how these can be delivered. This work is due to take place in the summer term, and will this committee have the opportunity to see these results, please?
Yeah, absolutely. We can bring it back to the committee. Yeah, it'll be using a combination of the reports that I've already referenced, like Make Your Mark, and then also we'll consider anything that we need to on a local level then of surveys and information that's coming to us. But obviously happy to share that with scrutiny.
Thank you very much. Question 6 is Victoria Horlock. Would you like to ask a question, please, Vic?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Okay, adding to Councillor Seaborn's question, referring to recommendation 2, you state that whilst the volume of young people experiencing significant adverse impacts from the pandemic has not increased discernibly, children and young people are presenting more complex and significant needs requiring support from services. You then go on to say that you are planning to carry out a survey of children and young people. What are we doing in the short term to address children and young people presenting more complex and significant needs? As I'm concerned that actions to address these issues won't be carried out until the results of the survey are reported after the summer term period.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for that question, because there could be confusion there, and let me see if I can address that. So the source of information that we have about the increase in the complexity of need comes from a piece of work we did across the wider support youth, the wider youth support network with partners, from the YOS, from our services in education, and partners across council and allied services. And that was based on just a report back from individual services asking for their experience. Now, we need to go back out and repeat that piece of work, I think, and look at developing a richer picture of what we think the complexity of need and the picture of the needs are there across that network. But what we were being told and what we're seeing at the moment in the data that we have available to us is that we're not seeing lots more. We know exclusion rates are starting to rise, for example. But again, I think what we're really picking up from schools and from partners is that the needs that children are presenting are probably the residue and impact of what they've been through and their experiences has been over this period. So the reassurance I'd like to give you is we are already well placed to intervene for individual young people. We've improved, for example, the communication we have across our support services. We're joining up things internally in terms of educational welfare, working with ALN. We've obviously got, we've based a psychologist time within the youth service to support them in terms of their understanding how they can intervene. And we've done that, I think, just before the pandemic period started. And we're working really closely with social care colleagues as well to make sure that we've got a good picture of the most vulnerable children how we're intervening. And again, that work developed at pace throughout this last period. So the individual support for individual children, I think is there. I think there's more work we're going to do around looking at how effectively we are supporting children, because that's part of the work we'll do around self-evaluation in any case. I've mentioned, and the report mentions, we want to ask children and young people themselves. Now, one of the things we did try to do during the pandemic is we went to the youth forum and asked, could we put out an additional survey to ask those questions? And at that point, children and young people were saying they were being surveyed by the Children's Commissioner, and lots of other agencies like Health were asking lots of questions. So we use that information, but I think we're at the point now where we want to go back out and ask children and young people in Torvine ourselves and do that piece of work. I've mentioned that we're also going to get together with key stakeholders like schools, but invite colleagues from Health to those meetings as well to talk about the framework for whole school approaches, for example, to supporting children's well-being. How do we now look at what, if anything, we need to do differently going forward over the coming year? So I can assure you that we are looking at individual pupil need, individual child need, and there's a range of support in place for children and young people. But we just need to reflect now about, actually, does the old model still work, or do we need to change? What was the sign? Sorry, that's just off on that. Or do we need to, still with us, do we need to change the model of delivery? Some of it will probably continue. Some things I think we can adapt and change. So that's where we are at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was a sign, that was, Dermot. Vicky, you've got the next question as well, please. Oh, sorry, Kath. Did you want to pick up on that answer?
If I could, please, Chair. I was just wondering, I know we've spoken about this previously, Dermot, but are there any specific things going into place now for early years? Because obviously, as of now, the young people going into, rising threes and stuff will have spent the vast majority of their life during COVID and under restrictions, and in the next year or so we're going to have children starting in nurseries who have spent their entire lives so far under restrictions and during the pandemic. So have we put lots of support in place for early years staff to allow them to help these children to the best of their ability?
So over the last 2 years, we haven't slowed down in terms of, in fact, if anything, we've probably been working closer with early years colleagues than we've done before, because they face some specifically, challenging times. As committee will know, we work very closely with our partners in the private sector, because the bulk of our provision in early years, nearly all of it, is provided in partnership. So a key part of that work was also looking at how do we identify need, how do we respond to need in supporting settings, thinking around not only the requirements of the new legislation around ALN, but planning for those children and how we can support. So we now have in place an early years pathway that we've consulted very closely with early years settings on, looking at how everybody can best support and intervene children who may be presenting with difficulties. Obviously, we're just at the start of the implementation of that, and it's early days, but that framework is in place. And that's involved us creating some online resources as well, which are available to the setting. And our professional learning offer for settings has also been targeted on supporting that work too. We work very closely with early year settings. Again, it's an area, I think, because this is new, there are some significant changes. And for us as a council, we know it's part of our risk register that because of the new ALN Act, there are some new duties and responsibilities there. We previously funded or supported provision available, all three of those, for very few children, preschool relatively. So we have got resources in place available, and we're working through that process now with settings. And I think we've also updated clearly our information for parents too, and that goes back to the point I mentioned earlier. We've done that work in conjunction with the Parents Reference Group on a regional basis. So a lot of work going on. I've said at this committee before, one of my big concerns is about the impact on very young children in terms of their restricted experiences that they've had. Some children and young people, I should say, will have had over this period. So for me, looking at that, looking at the needs that they present over this period and the close monitoring that we need to have, both with early year settings and in schools, as you've mentioned, in terms of the transition, is really critical going forward.
Thank you. As you know, I have a COVID baby. She was 5 weeks old when we went into the first lockdown, and she's very different from the others. Thankfully, she has 3 brothers that she's been playing with. So I worry for young children who were only children during the pandemic and didn't have other children to play with. But she's not been to soft play centres. She's not done any of the things, the socialising and learning to share and all the things that children of her age usually do. She's missed out on. So I think they're going to be very different, the children turning up at nursery door over the next few years, and I'm glad to hear that you've got the support in place there for that.
Jack, can I just add to that? And I think that's why it's important we talk with schools now about what we all expect. We cannot expect the next 2 years to be like the 2 years before COVID because of the developmental experiences everyone in the system, children, young people and the adults, have been through. We talk about going back to normal, but actually, I don't think that's quite what's going to happen. I think we'll learn lots about how the adults, because parents and families have been through this experience and their expectations and their behaviours change too. So I think it's really incumbent upon us, in the education service and with schools and other partners to think, well, actually, how do we engage with and understand the needs of the whole system, not just children as well, because obviously families are a critical component in children's learning. How do we make sure we shape services to support their needs? Which takes me neatly back, Chair, again to that Children's Services Development Plan, which is a broad spectrum plan, not just about education, but about all council services focused around families and children and young people, and why that consultation will be really important. So we've lots of thinking and lots of planning to do together on that over the next few months.
Yeah. I agree, Councillor Evans. There's a lot of stress on parents as well. My little grandson has just started playgroup and cries terrifically when his mum walks out of the room because he's been with her for the last 2 years and not anything else. So there's parental stress there as well. So yeah. Councillor Killick.
Same track of socialisation. Is there an age group where exclusions are escalating faster?
Secondary exclusions are increasing more quickly. That isn't universally the case, but again, Councillor Killick, we can give you a breakdown of that pattern and provide that to committee. Not an issue. There have been some specific issues in some schools where we've supported and we've seen that number come down, but secondary is certainly rising much more quickly than primary. And I think that, certainly talking to some of the head teachers involved in those schools, again, they are reflecting back that pattern that we've mentioned earlier about the complexity and severity of need. The stress on older young people in Key Stage 4 this year, for example, those going through exams, those young people have never sat the public exam before, which again is a new experience that none of us in the system have ever encountered before. So there is a lot of stress in the system, and I would say, there's also not a typical experience for children in school at the moment. So our numbers, and this again is not an excuse, it's just a reflection of the picture of what's happening on the ground. So I checked the numbers of staff with COVID at the moment, and I think today it stands at 46 in schools. Now that's doubled in the last couple of weeks. So although we're coming through, we're seeing patterns of increase again. We have a number of outbreaks in a number of schools. So the impact for learners of that is that they may not be seeing their own teacher. Staff will be covering classes that they may not ordinarily cover. Often when I'm speaking to heads, they say, I've got to stop now, I've got to go off and do X, Y, and Z duty or bus duty or whatever. So the day-to-day experience for learners is still not back to where all of us in the system would like to see it. So I'm afraid some of that disruption, I suspect, will continue for some time. So not ideal.
Yeah. Councillor Collett-Talbot.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back to the point that Cathy made about early years, and I think it could be a really good piece of work for scrutiny at the next session to look at that and perhaps to get parents in, to get providers in, to ask them how things are, what support is being given and how they think it's working. So I think it could be a really useful piece of work. Thank you, Chair.
You're muted, Chair.
Yeah, I just realised I just said asterisk that one for the recommendations. I totally agree. Right, Vicky, we'll go back to your question that question 7 now.
Thank you. Yeah, so within the Audit Wales third recommendation, they state that actions are not yet clearly articulated and available to all partners, and the Council does not have a long-term delivery plan. Have these actions been articulated and made available to partners now?
As a function of the PSB not meeting, and only now we're looking at that piece of work, I think that's not the case, and I think that's why I've said earlier we need to review. Once we've got that decision and we've gotten some steer back from particularly public health colleagues, we need to reinvigorate the project plan. I think we've got a decision point. I think there is a lack of clarity that has, in our view, has to come from that partnership board, from a partnership perspective. Otherwise, we as council will have to take a different path and think differently about how we take this piece of work forward. What we can't do, and I'm keen that we need to finish. We need to finish what we've started, to be blunt, and we're keen to come up with a product that works for us. Now, ideally, and I think if we're going to do this comprehensively, as I've mentioned, it has to happen on a partnership basis. If that gets stuck, we will have to make a decision internally about, well, actually, do we now settle for, at the moment, an offer that looks at what we can do in Torvine with access to the information we've got for us, and park that wider piece of work because the partnership's not at a point where it wants to take it forward. I really hope we don't get to that point, but yeah, we haven't been able to articulate this. The short answer, we have not been able to articulate that clearly enough, and that's the reason why. But we'll get to that decision point in the next month or two at the latest. Okay.
Thank you.
Chair, I think you're on mute now.
I tried to turn it off because of feedback and then I forgot to turn it back on. So we're on to question 8 now, which is Councillor Colette Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Against recommendation 4, you state that the T22 work programme has also been reviewed and is being subsumed within the new Children's Service Development Plan, and that the consultation on this work will include a discussion suggesting outcome, measures and milestones. Who will these discussions take place with, and how will you define measures going forward to demonstrate that appropriate contributions are being made towards the wellbeing offer?
So this is the Children's Services Development Plan, as I mentioned. So this is something being led by the Chief Exec and members of the leadership team. And the intention is that that draft document now comes out over the next few weeks, I think initially with Cabinet, and then we'll agree the wider consultation process. So basically the intention is for this to be a very broad spectrum consultation with children and young people, the whole community, partners, including the third sector as well, of course, looking at how we collectively can address some of the key issues within the scope of that work. As I've mentioned previously, that plan looks at not just children's services in social care or in education, but takes a broad spectrum look at all of the services that we've got in place to support families and children and young people in Torvine 0 to 25. So the short answer again, I think, is that everyone will have an opportunity to be consulted on. I think the Chief Exec's view is that this will be hopefully helpful to the new administration coming in to think about the corporate plan going forward. We anticipate this will be a priority for the new council following the election in terms of support for children and young people. For all the reasons I think this committee's just rehearsed in terms of the impact that we've seen, but also because it's core to our values and what we believe in terms of how we need to improve services for the community. So the consultation process, I think, will be significant. As a 5-year plan, it will also need to have clearly articulated milestone measures, which I think what we're reflecting on is that we can really improve our overall planning process across council in terms of being far more focused on helping everyone understand the tangible outcomes that we're trying to achieve, to have far more rigour, I think, in terms of how we look at project planning, and some of your questions today have given voice to some of the concerns that we also share about, you know, are we able to really track progress in the way that we think we need to be, and we think we can see some improvement. So that's also been built into a new way of planning and a more rigorous way of planning and performance management for our staff in council.
Thank you. You're satisfied with that, Councillor Thomas? Yeah. You're on mute.
Just to say, Chair, is there any indication when this, do we know when the consultations will start? Or is that work still being done?
As I've said, I think it's being shared. I haven't got the date in front of me, but I think it's this month. It's been shared with Cabinet, and the decision then, once Cabinet have had a chance to review the outline plan, then the consultation process will be agreed, and that will be shared with everyone. And a timeline for consultation will be part of that discussion with Cabinet in terms of how they want to see that work taken forward. I anticipate that will begin almost immediately in the next month. So we'll see that being made available. And obviously there's quite a significant piece of work to make sure that consultation process is meaningful to all stakeholders, because what we have in the plan at the moment is a document I think that's probably suitable for some adults, you know, people who may be very closely aligned to this sort of work. We need to think about how do we make sure it's accessible for the whole community in terms of a wide range of adult audiences, and we haven't got a plan version yet that's also been developed for children and young people. So I think there's quite a bit of work we need to do in terms of making sure if we're going to have a meaningful consultation that plan is also made accessible to everyone, and obviously the translation of all that material to Welsh as well. So that's what we're taking into Cabinet, get a steer in terms of that timeline, and as I said earlier, I'll ensure that the chair is fully kept up to date in terms of what that timeline looks like. And once that plan is being signed off to be shared, then absolutely that will come out to everybody in the committee as well.
Thank you. That takes me to question 9, and it's with regards to recommendation 9. Have short, medium, long-term milestones now been defined within the subsumed Children's Development Service Plan? And if so, how will you test these measures to make sure that they are the most appropriate?
So the Children's Services Plan as it stands is a high-level plan. It's out for consultation shortly, as we've just discussed, or it will be coming out shortly. In terms of milestones, the plan will contain milestone measures, and obviously we'll need to inform service planning across council services too, and any allied services, and we'll expect to see milestone measures in all of those plans. I think that's an absolute recognition that we've collectively made as council, that the quality of service planning and the tracking of performance and outcome measures, I think we can improve. So that is going to be built in. In terms of the overall plan and what it needs to contain, clearly that will be informed by the consultation that's coming through, and it will change, no doubt it will change. In terms of the governance arrangements within the plan, and this is subject to the consultation itself, each pillar or each strand of work in the plan will have a senior responsible officer. He'll be responsible for ensuring delivery of the actions and the outcomes in the plan. There'll be monthly monitoring of those actions that will happen within an officer-led arena, and that will also be shared with the corporate leadership team on a monthly basis. Then that outcome, and it's something, again, committee might want to think about, is that something you'd like to see the outcome of? Because I can't see why that wouldn't be the case, but that might be something for you to consider. But there will also then be routine sharing of that information with the leader and with Cabinet on I think at the moment it's a termly basis that it's been put, or a quarterly basis that it's in the governance arrangement. But obviously this is subject to consultation. But the visibility, I suppose, and the rigour with which we look at the progress tracking against all of those actions, a lot of work is going into making sure that that's improved, that there's real clarity on that improvement tracking, and also the evaluation that we need to build into ensuring that we've still got the right activities. Because obviously you can have a great plan that you track really clearly, and it's doing the stuff you said it would, but it's not making the difference you need. So the evaluation cycle within the planning is also something that, again, corporately we've been doing a lot of work on. It absolutely isn't there at the moment, but we are planning to put that rigour in, and you'll see that when that will be manifest in the plan as it's released. So I hope, Chair, that answers each of the aspects of your question. Have I missed anything?
No, I think it was how will you test the measures and how do you make sure that they are appropriate was the main things. It's all well and good putting these in place, but if they're not the appropriate plans and we're not measuring them correctly, then that becomes an issue for us, doesn't it? So I think that's fine. Question 10 is our final question, and Victoria Haller, you've got that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as we've all discussed that we're concerned at the lack of progress towards the wellbeing offer and that significant pace needs to be made to take this forward now, how do you plan on picking up the pace with this going forward?
So, in danger of repeating what I've already said, so I think the key determinant of how we now move forward is the view from the partnership in terms of can we build the tool on DAWS. If we can, I think then we'll update the project plan with health colleagues and public health colleagues and partners across the PSP. We're looking at investment to take on the next phase of development, to develop the actual product, to do what we wanted to do, which is a bit of IT that pulls all that information out, that gives it in a user-friendly way, initially maybe for professionals, but also looking at future use for other users. We anticipate we'll need to identify a funding stream for that. That hasn't been identified across the partnership. So really, in effect, I think we'll be looking at developing an updated project plan with clear timescales, looking at delivery in this financial year. Hang on, not this financial year, next financial year. Sorry, I'm so ahead of myself there. At the very latest. If we cannot deliver it within that timescale, I think there's a question that comes back into the overall governance group around this about actually, is this something that we should pursue at this time? So I think there were some critical decisions about either can we do it on a partnership basis, and actually is the timescale that I've just outlined in terms of the next financial year contingent on where the funding comes from achievable? Is that a sensible thing to do? If it isn't, I think we need to reflect on do we take it forward? The other decision point there goes back to if we can't do it on a partnership basis, as a council, do we want to devise something which I think we can do very quickly, looking at what our wellbeing offer is internally and with allied services. So things like, for example, it's a very simple sign up to work with the Leisure Trust to look at the range of wellbeing services that they provide, or with other partners perhaps in TVA. So I think we've got a decision there. Either way, updated project plan I think comes through in the next 6 to 8 weeks, contingent on that decision point. And for me, none of us want to see this piece of work linger any longer than it needs to. We are now back into a more typical way of working, and we can get on. I think there's some big decisions to be made about what we want to achieve, and that's the point I think we need to go back and reflect on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our questions that we had prepared. Any other supplementary questions from anybody before we say thank you very much to the officers? No. Thank you very much. Can I then thank the officers for their time and contributions to the meeting?
Chair.
Yes. Dermot?
Sorry, Chair, I was just saying thank you. Thank the committee.
Oh, sorry. I was echoing, so I was hearing myself again, and I still am. So you are now welcome to leave the meeting. Thanks very much for your contributions, Dermot and Jess. And this members can formulate their recommendations once you've left. Thank you very much. Committee okay, Geraint?
Yes, Chair, it's just Billy No Mates now in the chamber.
Oh, well, there we go. Okay, may I remind members what's been asked of the Scrutiny Committee to consider when coming up with their recommendations. Members have been asked to review whether appropriate progress is being made in developing a wellbeing offer to the children and young people of Torfaen, And point 2, to provide recommendations to the Executive Member for Education on any areas for improvement, development required. Do members have any specific recommendations that they would like to make on the report? Leanne, shall we go to you first to see what you've picked up?
Yeah, of course. There's further participation and engagement for parents and wider community on the shaping of services.
I'm sorry, Chair, I can't understand anything Leanne is saying. It's so echoey.
So echoing. Oh, Chair, you're on mute. Chair, you're still on mute.
I'm asking everybody to turn their microphones off, and mine's off. If we could all turn our microphones off, we might be able to. That was a little easier for understanding then. So I'll switch my mic off, and you continue, Leanne. Thank you.
Apologies, I was beginning to think it was just me then. That's a lot better. I can't hear myself talk now. There's nothing worse. Right, so one of the main recommendations I captured was further participation and engagement required with parents and the wider community on the shaping of services within the wellbeing offer. I think that was on the back of something that's that Jess was answering a question to. Jess offered to provide the framework on who they are engaging with in different forums, and that was in response to Councillor Killock's question, and she said she could provide that information.
Sorry to interrupt, Leanne. Can we include foster parents as well with that parental responsibility? Because there's a lot of our children in care that have foster parents that might need a voice in this as well.
Yeah.
Janet Jones, you've got something to add on that one?
Yes, Chair. Including what Leanne has just said, there are some new groups forming now, and I wonder, is the officer aware of these groups are providing after-school activities, which are setting up? There's one in Glenavon, and they are catering with children up to 11 years of age, and I'm sure they would like to be involved. And they are linking up with our play service with Julian Devine. So I would like to ask if that group could be included in any, to find out their views, please, Chair.
Thank you.
I think the best thing to do is to wait for the framework off, Jess.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're aware of those specific groups, then you can put the question to Jess as to why they haven't been included or whatever.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah, thank you.
I think Dermot offered a project plan update to the committee in the future on where they are exactly with the offer and the sort of progress against milestone update as well. Survey of young people to be shared with committee after completion in the summer term. And then I'm not sure if you formally wanted to request this information, Councillor Killock, but in response to your question on whether fixed term exclusions were increasing within a certain age, Dermot did offer to provide that information to you. So I don't know whether you want to take that offer up.
I think that's something that the committee would be interested in the next term, because numbers are rising. Yes. So,
Okay.
anybody?
Sorry.
Janet? All right, I'm lip reading, you haven't put your hand down, thank you. Okay, carry on, Leanne.
Lastly then, I'm still echoing again.
Yeah, my mic's on, let's turn it off.
Sorry. And then with regards to Councillor Colette Thomas's last point, I've done a flag for myself to look at for the committee going forward to look at early years within their basket of items for their work programme, and then looking at whether, if that item was selected, looking at inviting parents and partners to also find out their views. So obviously I'll put that forward as part of their visioning, and then it'll be up to the committee then to determine what they put in their basket.
Yes.
And that's it.
Councillor Catherine
Yeah,
Evans.
thanks, Chair. It's not actually a recommendation, it's more of a concern, and it was something that Dermot, a comment that Dermot made almost as a throwaway comment about the amount of staff he has off at the school staff at the moment that are off with COVID and how it's risen. And I was talking to a deputy head of a Cwmbran primary school the other day, and he said before the pandemic, 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone would start ringing with supply agencies. Do you need any staff? How many do you need? You know. Now, he told me the other day he rang, I think he said over 30 agencies looking desperately for supply staff for the school. And I'm concerned that if the numbers of school staff that are off with COVID are rising, we know there's an issue with getting supply in. Are we going to end up in a situation where we have class closures and school closures again due to staffing issues? And it's just been playing on my mind when Dermot said it, when he said it had risen quite significantly, and I thought, oh, are we heading towards that again? Sorry, it was just in my head.
Okay, thanks. John Killick, you've got a recommendation or a comment?
Yeah, it's a recommendation that as part of the preparatory process for any policy, young people are involved at that time. That it's not left too late so that they're just responding to something. And I'd like to add into that they are offered a menu of ways in which we can consult with them, because unless you offer them a menu, it won't actually occur to most young people that we can say, oh, can we have a weekend away, please? You know, that will not be part of their psyche. And just to say to members, you might wonder why I keep banging on about this. It's for two reasons. One, young people come up with better ideas. And secondly, you may be surprised to know, but from every experience I've had, they come up with cheaper ideas because they don't assume that there's millions of pounds to be spent. And they come up with very simple, very practical ideas. And if I could leave something with you into the future, could you just keep an eye on that for me, please? Because I won't be with you. Thank you.
Absolutely, John. And we've been there a long time. And, you know, with a little bit of relaxation and an organised event, you get a lot more out of children. We did a care leavers conference once, and Councillor Colette Thomas will remember this. And it was about care leavers who, I think I've said, who had a social worker on their shoulder and got everything sorted for them. But then when they've gone to reception on their own, they've been pushed from pillar to post, which is where TIPS came from, the Torfaen Young People Service. That came out of that conference. It was a service where a young lad leaving care was given a flat, but nobody told him he had to buy a cooker or a bed and how to cook. And, you know, it's that type of thing. We make sure they've got accommodation, but do we follow up with, you know, what is actually required? So I'm a firm believer that a youth conference or another way of consulting is a better process. Colette, you wanted to come in?
I'd just like to thank John actually for his comments and his contributions in the meetings. It has been really, really valuable, and I don't know whether we'll all be here after the next election, but certainly your contribution has been very welcome, and you will be missed in the future, John.
Well, I'm hoping to get all the statutory reps back on this committee, so that should be there, and perhaps you could keep an eye out for that, John, in your governor role or your community role. So, Leanne, yeah, I totally agree. Leanne, I've got a recommendation that we receive the children's plan as soon as possible. Otherwise, you know, it's two documents in tandem and we're not marrying them up. And Dermot did mention that there was only a specific £10,000, I think, funding stream to do all this process, and we wanted some pace on it. So a recommendation to the executive member that there's sufficient funding to take this on with a bit more pace. Might be a good response. Are we all happy with that? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, any other comments? No? Can I thank you all for your contribution? I think this last couple of meetings with scrutiny has been really, really useful. I can only apologise that we haven't had our schools monitoring up and running. We did do a meet and greet, but we will get there, I promise you. So that's agenda item 7 now, which takes us to the date and the time of meetings. Are we aware of when or what or why? No. Okay. Obviously, this is our last meeting, so it will go to the new council and the new council members and the new education scrutiny committee. So until after the elections, this committee's next meeting will take place sometime in the summer, and we'll begin in the committee with the committee's visioning session. So we've got a few things ready for the pot, I think, or the basket. And the new committee will determine their workload for the year ahead. Can I just close the meeting now and thank everybody for their participation? Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chair.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks
yeah.
all. Bye. Bye, Vicky.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.